Jim, it's almost 3. She's ready to report.
Well, actually, what we did was we ran it through VNC, but yeah, you can run it.
I got both my pockets stuffed.
Nice.
Girls don't have pockets.
He does. I do what?
USB kill USBs. Did you ever touch the wires together and scare the hell out of yourself?
What do you mean?
No, I didn't touch it together. I would never do that. I have
All right, so what's this one? Oh, just the up and down arrows? Okay.
where you can protection wires.
Yes, she said it was a minute till.
Try it. Because I tried mine and never got it working right.
You're no worse off. You're no worse off.
Right, it'll run, but I can't get it to like push.
All right, stop. We're ready.
All right, Amy.
All right.
Shall we get started?
Are you ready? What the hell? You didn't give us a cue.
She did. She told me. I told you.
All right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
Go.
No.
Good afternoon.
Oh,
Wow, that's loud.
Wow, yes.
relax.
I'm good. So,
Give him a drink.
welcome to our history of teaching web application testing and other testing, classroom in a box, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the really ugly. I'm Lee Neely. I'm out at Lawrence Livermore Lab. This is Chelle Clement, formerly at Lawrence Livermore, now blissfully.
I escaped.
And I'm Jim McMurray with Milton Security.
So what we wanted to do, we were teaching classes on InfoSec, on how to do stuff. We wanted to give students some degree of knowledge, and give them something they could, the basics of pen testing to test applications, whether it was mobile, web, or other facilities. We wanted to give them something they could take with them. We wanted to show them the various apps. For most of the people in this room, you're familiar with all the hackable tools, whether it's Metasploit or Burp or all that. There are other audiences, they're like deer in the headlights. And
Auditors have no idea. They want to learn something about it, but auditors do not know the language, and that was one of our early takeaways for us, was that we had to simplify the terms and try and find a new way of coming at the program so that they would understand what we were trying to say to them.
a lot of our experience was gained at the ISACA LA chapter. LA ISACA is chapter number 1. While ISACA is moving into the cybersecurity space in their education, their background is in auditing, and much more opportunity to bring people up. I'm sure none of you have had to deal with the auditors that don't understand the technology they're auditing, or what you do, whether you're on the red, blue, or purple team. So we want to bridge those gaps, make it real. The light bulb comes on bright sometimes. It's really cool. However, there's this path we've had to follow, or followed. So let's start with what we thought we could do.
I need to get on that side. We were always trying to find a way to design the class towards what the people already knew and what could.
So you're on the recording.
Let's see. The first one, I can hear me fine. The first one was, designing a hands-on class that was using laptops. That was the first one. And also using demos, hopefully with a classroom network, and teams or advocating for teamwork. The first real hands-on that the three of us did together, 20 people registered for the class. 10 people showed up. One person read the emails that we sent out saying, you need to have admin on your laptop, you needed VNC, and what was the third one that needed to be on there?
Just up to date.
Yeah, up to date, having it up to date. We wasted 4 hours on people who, when they turned on their laptops, all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's updates coming. Oh, I don't have admin. I can't do this. I can't do that. It made life really difficult for us. The afternoon, pretty much we had to do a lot of demos so that they could at least get an idea of what we were trying to show them. And going in, and we went to the website that went into the back doors. Showdown. We started showing them how to use Showdown. There were a couple of people in that class that went crazy over that. They went out and bought the cheapo package and started playing with where they wanted to go themselves. We really had high hopes that the people that had signed up for these classes actually wanted to learn something, that they had read the information, that they were prepared for a workshop. Reality, we had one student in that first class who showed up, who did not participate for 2 days, that just sat back and let the guy next to her do all the work, and at the end she's like, so where's my certificate that I did this class? I swear to God. It was pretty amazing to us too. We actually in that first class only had one person who was ready from the get-go. One person. A couple of others came on board fairly quickly, and then there were a couple that were never checked in.
So, going back a slide, how we thought we would do it, teaching someone web app security is really difficult, and it can be problematic. Let me get over here so they can hear me. It can be kind of problematic, especially with someone who doesn't even know basic concepts. So our idea was to bring in at least a classroom in a box, get everything configured for them and set up. But the key part about it was the students had to come wanting to learn, and most of the time that we saw in the first class, that really wasn't the case. Our expectations were that the attendees actually wanted to be there. They were being paid to be there. That wasn't the case. They didn't want to be there. Our first one at ISACA, it was an 8-hour workshop. We spent most of the time helping them, even bringing their own machines up so they could connect to the network.
This is actually before the one you've been talking about. This is the one I tried to do it on my own. I thought, let's teach people about vulnerability in web apps. I mean, this was web apps? This was mobile apps. I thought, we could teach people how to unwind Android applications, change them, recompile them, and now have a changed application that acts like the real Wells Fargo app, want to play a game app, whatever we started with. So the tools required internet access. We didn't have internet access. What I did, I knew that there was going to be challenges in the conference room with class. So I actually thought, well, we're in this room. It's near the windows. I'll grab 3 or 4 mobile hotspots. They'll connect to them. It'll work fine. It'll work fine. Not so much. It turns out that building and that conference room is a most excellent Faraday cage. I was providing on USB for everybody a Kali Linux VM, and it was in the class instructions sent out by the organizer to bring a Windows box that could run VMware. One student thought that their iPad would be perfect because we're doing mobile app testing. We had some issues also with the building defenses. So when the Wi-Fi hotspots work, at that time, if you remember some of the hotel chains, when you set up your own network, their wireless defenses would shut it down because they wanted you to pay for their network. Now that's fallen apart and you can't do it anymore, but back then, that was happening.
It's only 3 years ago.
Before?
15.
Okay. I need all the clues I can get. I'm sure I will make mistakes. Please don't hesitate to help me. So, and it also turns out that as I was trying to teach the concepts behind what we were doing, as I was going through the material, I got feedback was provided on the break to stop providing the background and let's get on to the labs. From a group that didn't have experience in what we were about to do. It was interesting. Next slide, please. So,
Number 2.
you want to take this one, Jim?
No, you go ahead.
So, after that, I said, okay, I need some professional help. I need some cohorts. I pitched the idea of what we wanted to do to Jim, and he came through with some really great ideas. What we came up with in Foundation for ISACA in 2017 was a 2-day workshop on web application testing and cheating to win. The idea was to teach web application pen testing, but in a simplified approach that they could use and succeed. We all know there are pen test methodologies that are very, very rigorous, very prescribed. Not the entry-level pen testers forte and a 2-day lab. We also wanted to make sure there were labs and exercises where they could apply what they were learning. And we wanted to eliminate the variable of I brought my laptop, it says iPad on it. Anyway, did I catch all of them?
So the thing that we came up with was a Raspberry Pi Zero with a USB connector on it that you would stick it into your Windows 10 or your Linux box, and it's, you could VNC to it. It has Matilde and a bunch of tools on it, so everything's already pre-configured and ready to go.
Jim also created a classroom in a box that consisted of 2 Intel NUCs with targets on it, as well as wireless access point, so we were self-contained. No more reliance on cellular. All we needed is the building network to work.
Right.
Sounds good, right? The good.
Everything that they could possibly use and tools that they had no idea about were all loaded onto the Raspberry Pi. And the targets were both on the Pi and on the server that was in the corner. And Jim, of course, had bourbon for everybody when it got too frustrating.
Jim thinks of all kinds of details.
So the ugly.
The ugly, as I told you before, 2 emails were sent out to everybody telling them what the expectations were and what they needed. 10% of the class actually read it. The rest went, oh yeah, I got it. I figured I'd deal with it on Saturday morning when I showed up. What was it? Half the class?
Half the class had an updated OS.
Yeah.
So the Raspberry Pi Zero wouldn't work.
That wasn't working. And
about 60% had admin on their laptops. That was one of the requirements. They needed to have admin permissions on their laptop to actually configure the Pi for it to work for them.
we could tell the ones who really wanted to do it. There was one lady from LA Municipal Water. She went crazy getting the admin back on her machine, getting a hold of somebody who wasn't working that weekend, and she really wanted to learn what we had to tell her.
And about 30% just wanted to be there for a demo.
Yeah, a few.
So I wanted to drill into the. So, getting all those tools on the Raspberry Pi was a miracle that Jim came up with. There is a load you can put on there once you've got Raspberry sitting there that will load Pretty much everything.
Pretty much everything.
And that was awesome because one of the concerns we had was how are we going to get everything loaded and configured? The Raspberry Pi Zero is an awesome platform. It runs really well. It is a little less powerful than we thought.
Trying to run Zap on a Pi Zero is kind of difficult.
Yes. Try to fire up Chrome and Burp Suite, and I watched the load on the Pi Zero get up to 25 and then die. We tried overclocking.
That worked a little.
That helped a little. So, but this is so the Pi Zero is really cool, really capable, and but you got to be careful about what tools you fire up. I think.
Right.
And by the way, at basically $5 for the Pi, what was it, $1 for the daughter board, the USB, and then the memory card. It was great. We could give those, for less than $10, we're giving a functioning computer to the student. They could take it home. All the stuff was there. Easy peasy, right? But excellent. So this was the genius that Jim brought to the table.
I don't know about genius, but.
But we've gotten into quite a few discussions since then. Was it building defenses that were taking the wireless network offline, or was there a hacker? Jim has a reasonable amount of proof that there may have been a guy next door.
Just someone stomping on the signal. I wouldn't say attacking, just stomping our signal. That's all.
I thought it was the building again, forgetting that the rules had changed and they couldn't do that anymore. And I'm like, no. And then Jim looked a little closer and he was right. Somebody was stomping on our signal somewhere, which meant during the class we had to reboot the wireless, which is never disruptive to a class, right? So
Number 3.
Yeah, so the number 3. So this last spring, I decided, what the hell, I'll do it again. Why not? With Peter Morin, who's a great guy that works for, I forgot who he's working for now.
Canada.
He's up in Canada. We decided we'd do a 2-day workshop. Red team, blue team. One classroom was going to be full of red teamers. We were going to teach them pen testing and how to attack. The other classroom was going to be full of blue teamers. He was going to teach them how to adjust firewalls, catch logs, then stop us in our tracks. He had configured the targets with known vulnerabilities. Everything was set up. Great setup. Awesome class startup. One of the things we did that worked really well is we did both wired and wireless networks. So if you had a machine and you didn't have a wireless card, or if the wireless crapped out for whatever reason, I had wired. That worked really great. This time, I didn't, because I didn't have the Milton Resources building pies. I said, Kali Live. Anybody can boot that. We'll take the host OS out of the picture, right? This one we did Kali Live. Mm-hmm. Or people could install Kali. And like I said, and when it came, I had targets for the pen testing on my laptop, and for the CTF, which was the second half of the second day, those targets were actually on Peter's network. In a different room. So they were going to be pristine.
One of the laptops failed miserably. The person who owned the laptop absolutely insisted it was because of Kali Live. It was a brand new laptop, which made it very suspicious for us because this attendee came back claiming that they had lost a whole year's worth of class study that they had been doing on the side. Most of the people were happy to watch the instructor defend what was going on. Maybe 20% of the people that signed up went over to be on the attack team, and the persistent partition was not working out.
Anybody not familiar with the persistent mode boot in Kali Live? So for those of you who don't, it's basically intended you can install and configure tools, and then when you boot it, it's there. I thought, okay, great. We'll put Nmap on there. We'll configure the Wi-Fi. Blah blah blah. That was sort of a bust. I think in the future, the pre-configured, pre-installed Kali that would run in live is the choice there. Not just so that the standard boot will work. No man behind the curtain stuff.
So the next one, we decided we love pain so much that we would do it again. And we would do it even in a bigger venue and have more pain. And we visited the city of San Francisco. And at RSA, we decided that we would do a 2-hour lab. And I went out and I bought 40 Chromebooks, side-loaded Kali onto them and all the tools, pre-configured them all over again. This way we took the user's machine totally out of the picture to try and make it so we could focus on, especially with only a 2-hour lab, exactly what we wanted to teach them in a very short amount of time. The good, there isn't a good slide here, there's only a bad. But the good, I think the good part about it is we learned a lot from that, and we were able to teach quite a lot in a 2-hour period, considering what we went through. RSA originally had told us that we would have both wired and wireless network in there. We would have power at every desk, and it was great. And then a week before, they decided, no, you guys are too much of a danger. We're not going to give you wired or wireless, and we're not going to give you power either. So that made it even more fun.
Exactly.
More challenges.
So the bad part about it was there are too many networks at RSA. A lot of stomping on signal everywhere. Since we didn't have wired network, that really limited us. So the Chromebooks kind of kept dropping off here and there. One of our tools did need internet access, so that was not accessible. And the one-to-one mapping of targets on the Chromebooks were not always successful as we had planned. We did have backup targets. We had more machines, so we were able to rectify the issue. I think overall, the RSA one actually was a better success than the other classes.
Yes.
And going forward, I think that's a better model to teach within. The more I have control of the actual systems, the better the result is. You want to say something else? Okay.
So this summer, I got a call from a friend of mine and said, well, actually it was, somewhere this summer, and she says, would you like to come present at Misty San Diego? I'm like, sure. You can do an 8-hour class for ethical hacking for auditors, can't you? And with and could you do some labs too? Oh, and by the way, could you also do a presentation on top of that? Piece of cake, right? Well, fortunately, I had done that class with Peter, so I had a whole class on pen testing to draw from.
And you could simplify it.
And I could simplify it.
For auditors.
So the good on this one, so I used a lot of the same things. I used the Kali Live again. That worked. I simplified what we were doing so that tools that weren't on the Kali Live didn't matter. I had my laptop had targets on it. I actually had a spare laptop with more targets on it. Once again, I brought the wired network with me, so we had wired and wireless.
And we were not attacked by the building for a change.
Or a hacker, or anybody else. So we had a solid network. Remarkably, the Misty attendees, who I wasn't sure what their focus was, this is an IT audit conference. I had to say the A word again, right? Most of the class had explored Linux. They knew what the command prompt was. It's like, holy moly. And as Shelley said, our network wasn't attacked. It was really solid. We had a very high success rate. We did have one student who didn't get the memo about bringing a laptop. And rather than get their laptop out of the room, they offered to pair with the student next to him, which pairing with the student basically looked like this.
Or was digging out.
Or, yeah. I'm sure he got a lot of social media done. So, like I said, learned a lot there. So,
Yeah.
oh, like I said, the bad. So here's the slide. We had a student show up an hour late. Very interesting. And we had 2 attendees that had to leave after 3 hours. But that still left us a pretty good block. And Cali does not have drivers for the wireless on the MacBook Air. So
We figured out a solution for that. We wired the one laptop, and then you had your Mac.
I had a USB to Ethernet adapter for the Mac. We were able to put them on a wire. There really wasn't anything ugly on this one. It was the most for that environment. It was the most successful. I had leveraged a lot of what we learned at RSA and at ISACA. And more than half of the labs actually worked. In previous examples, we spent so much time messing with failed networks or infrastructure that wasn't right. In other words, laptops not working. We couldn't do a lot of the labs. They had to be turned into demos. I mean, that 2-day class we did in ISACA where we had the classroom in the box and the Pi Zeros, we actually had to resculpture the class during lunch to change it from hands-on lab to demos. And actually take a bunch of the labs out because the time spent, because the students didn't have admin and couldn't configure the box. For those of you with a little more technical, this is actually an NDIS 6 device when you plug it in. And in order to configure the network bridging, you need admin. Right? Trivial for probably most of you in the room. You can figure that out very quickly. Not so trivial for that class. And like I said, 80% of the attendees knew what was going on. This was awesome. We actually
Participating. They were getting in there, they were calling over, we weren't having to update their machines or give them other pieces to try and do. They were actually doing it and were able to follow through on the labs.
We finished early.
So what really worked? You know, out of all of these trainings that we've given, I think the constraints really were all about location, time, and experience of the student arriving. And teaching web app security is not an easy thing to do in even a 2-day course, especially if the student doesn't come prepared. The closest we've gotten to doing something really well was the bootable Kali USB and the Chromebooks. Being able to add VMs as needed. You know, at some places we had to make sure that, you know, with no power, no internet connection, and no ability to get any signal outside of like, for example, RSA, we're in the basement, being able to be a standalone system. Having wired and wireless options is great. We're thinking maybe we could do a hosted environment, but that really depends on, again, the conference, whether or not they provide a wired network. And of course, if it's a conference provided network, how secure is that actually? Is it going to be taken down by someone who is also attending the conference? No one here would do something like that, of course.
The other concern on the conference provider network is what's the ULO? Will we be able to do the kind of activities we want to do over that network, or will that be a problem? You know, getting a class, teaching a classroom how to do Nmap scans locally is one thing, but if they're doing it over the network to targets, they can wind up getting out of scope. They could wind up flooding the network. And yes, we could put gateways between us and that. But if we're using a hosted environment, what goes where? So we want to make sure we don't get in big trouble. We want permission, you know, that get out of jail free thing that everybody told you about. Another thing I wanted to add to your excellent summation was that we eliminate the desktop as much as possible so the student can win. We eliminate the network. Whether the VMs are running on a laptop or on your ESXi server, being able to control them and modify them in the room is really nice, and I'm not sure how a hosted environment would be. Because you've got the console right there, right? You can tweak them, you can change them, you can kill them, you can fix them. So that a little bit of unknown. But we have heard that there's been a lot of success using a hosted environment to provide both clients and servers. And the other thing is, the environment constraints we're working at, they're not paying for the environment. They don't have. We have to bring it and create it into being. So they don't have the budget for that. So that means it falls on us to figure out what we're willing to write off.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Write off.
and I'm not looking for that's not a sympathy play. I'm just saying it's a variable. So if you're doing this on your own, you have to understand what your resources are, what you can ask for and expect. Like I said, we'd love a conference provided network that had internet speed, that we had permission carte blanche, and that we knew we wouldn't take out the rest of the conference. The goal is to teach safely, not take anybody else out.
Right.
What am I forgetting? I know I'm forgetting something. What? Oh, yes. Don't ping me at 3 in the morning when I remember. But mostly we wanted to say thank you for letting us explain this wonderful journey we've had. It's been a lot of fun. We learned a lot. And what we're hoping is that you get some hints when you want to take what you've learned and take it out in the field and teach others. Because that's an awesome thing. When you're sitting there and somebody actually does an exploit, whether it's a simple, you man in the middle with burp and you change the contents of a website, or you find a hidden service and drop in, getting shell for the first time. You remember the first time you got shell on something? Helping somebody do that for the first time is like a contact high. And I actually encourage everybody who has learned stuff to teach others how to do it. To share. Because believe it or not, you learn something too. And I don't want it to be about learning that your environment was wrong.
Right.
Having your environment blow up is educational. And look at all we learned in 5 iterations. I'm hoping you can skip a few iterations and stick with the aha moments. And oh, by the way, maybe use some of this information when building a home lab. Intel NUC's a really inexpensive server now, and
I should have waited to buy yours.
that M2 solid-state drive makes up for a lot of CPU power. You don't have to buy the big-ass CPU to host a lot of stuff. Oh, and by the way, there are vulnerable targets you can get. Metasploitable 2 and 3, DVWM, lots of vulnerable targets out there. You do not have to make them. You can. I'm not going to tell you no, but I say go download something somebody else has done, because you can also download instructions if you get stuck. Anything you want to add?
No.
So like I said, thank you all very much. Really appreciate the afternoon.
And who didn't get a Trevor?
Who wants a Trevor? We got a couple more of them.
Thanks.